Yo team, on a scale of 1 to 10 of the weirdest places I've filmed one of these videos, it's probably at the top of the list. I'm in the storeroom at the shop that I own. Bit weird, innit? However, got decorators in and I wanted to do a video because I've been requested a subject matter, so I thought there's nowhere else to do it. Can't go in my office, they're doing the floors around there, can't go in the shop, they're doing that, so I thought why not do it from the comfort of the very glamorous storeroom that we got. Anyway, today's video is all about follow the profit. Don't be distracted by turnover, don't be distracted by the idea of growth. Follow the profit.
Show me the money!
That's it, brother, but you got to yell that shit!
Show me the money!
I need to feel you, Jerry!
Show me the money!
Jerry, you better yell!
Show me the money!
We'll get into the video. Please like, please subscribe, helps the channel massively, and by all means chuck in some requests and some comments as I've been getting. As I've said in other videos, loads of people are emailing me somehow or another, which is all good from my point of view, but if there's anything you would like to know about, check out a couple of the other videos that I've done for those of you that are new to the channel. The one about my career bio kind of give you some context because I've dumped out a load of videos now, so probably help if you knew who I am and why what I've got to say is at least worth listening to for the next 5 or 6 minutes. But anyway, let's talk about following the profit. And the first point, before I go into the detail, when I say focusing on the profit, know where it's coming from, because that's part of your strategy of any successful business, is to grow turnover, but most importantly, grow profit. Focusing on the areas that make you the most money.
It's far easier to make money selling half as much but at double the price.
And that's not penny pinching and cutting corners. If there's a product that you have, if you sell 2 or 3 different products and one of them is the biggest seller but it's the lowest margin and your lowest net contributor, maybe that's your choice and you want to proceed with that. But actually, maybe you've got something that sells half as much but for twice the margin. Put energy into where the margin is coming from, because work smart, not hard. Those of us that are successful, we all know that we signed up for working hard, but where you can work smarter is not focusing on the turnover. Do yourself a favour. If you've got multiple sales channels or multiple products, work out where the best profit is, your biggest bang for buck, for want of a better phrase, and run at that. Take that and run with it. Have a single strategy that targets your most profitable line items and see if we can grow that quicker. Because even if the turnover doesn't hit the dizzy heights of some of the lesser margin stuff, who cares? Most of us are in this game for profit, and even if you're in a hyper growth company, there will come a point where someone knocks on the door and goes, where's the road to profit? So you might as well start from that point. Instead of chasing it once you've got turnover and you're trying to work out and make it drop through, start with the profit, work out what your most profitable line items are and have a strategy that achieves that. Even if you want this uber growth, set aside a collection of people, a person, a team, whatever it might be, and focus in on where that margin is coming from and run at it. Let everyone else do their thing, but have that bankable margin that you can rely on. And here's a couple of examples of where I think it's tangible. So when I say follow the profit, I mean follow the profit.
If you're some man, what the rock is cooking.
If you want to start your own business, if you're a manager, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a leader and you're running a business, focus on where the margin comes from. You've got your turnover, you've got your gross profits, and you've got your net profits. For the purpose of what we're talking about, we're going to focus on where your margin is coming from, ignoring what's going on below here, which is your overheads and the running costs of the business. Let's make sure that you are making profit where you're supposed to be.
You don't know the difference between gross profit and net profit, do you? He admitted it. And the director did something. He pulls out a bit of paper and some crayons. And Richard Branson says that he drew on this bit of paper the sea with his crayons, and he drew a net in the middle of it and started to draw some fish. And then he explained that the fish that are in the net are the net profit, and the water around it is the turnover.
on whatever it is, whether you're retailing, offering a service, product, whatever it might be. Don't be distracted. Most businesses have multiple revenue streams or multiple customers. Do not lose sight of what the margin is for each job that you are looking to win. It's a key part of your focus. Do not be distracted by the sexy big figures that get quoted and bandied around, turnovers, year-on-year growth. Before we run off after that growth, let's focus in and make sure we understand when our margin's coming from. So I'll walk you through some tangible examples of what that actually means. So focusing on the profit, tangibly what that actually means is working it out and managing it. So in the example of a shop, something that I know, but I'll give you other examples. Let's just take anything. Let's take a sandwich. The sandwich might sell for £3. What we're focusing on is what does it cost to make that sandwich. The bread, the butter, the cheese, the ham, the salad. You want to work to a certain margin. Now some people in businesses take whatever it costs and double it. But it's about what can the market take. So you have to be very cognizant of what is value in the marketplace for whatever it is that you are selling. But you need to focus in on those margins. So an example that I use in the shop, where we've worked out set margins that we would like to achieve, and it varies product by product. But if we sell a brownie, there's not much margin in the brownie, so we have to make sure that the staff serve it in a certain container and not a different one, because that can genuinely be the difference between making some money and breaking even on that product. But we see the brownie as a way of hooking customers in. They taste amazing. If you charge any more, you probably put someone off. So we're cognizant, we're following the profit, but to get the profit we've got to bring them in through the door. So certain products, they're not quite loss leaders, i.e. products that we don't make money on, but it brings in the footfall. But we then have to make sure that we're protecting the margin elsewhere. So in the example of this sandwich, the cost base may be £1.50. Therefore you have the gross margin at £3 of £1.50 to play with. You have to remember though, and then underneath, this is where your overheads, your salaries and things will come out. It's important that you protect that margin, because there's only so much you can do at the bottom end, i.e. once you've sold it, there's certain irremovable costs, the rent, the rates, the electricity, the insurance, the salaries. So you've got to make sure that you're sweating that. If that's portion control, if that's ensuring that there is a low level of wastage, do not just assume you're hitting that £1.50 cash margin. You've got to be cognizant, you've got to check in on that, because talking about, as I said with the brownie, staff, what they serve it in, the dispo, the number of waste, overproducing it, it's not just as easy as hitting a gross margin number. So you really have to focus in on ensuring you know every penny that is going into that. And if you then over time have a considerable amount of wastage on that product, if you can't remove it, which I would advise you do in most cases, you need to allow for that waste. So your cash margin of £1.50 on that £3 sandwich might actually realistically be £1.10. But don't kid yourself, when I say the cost of that sandwich is £1.50, if you serve it in cellophane or a paper bag or a sandwich box, that's included in the cost. Do not kid yourself, these things are not free. So if you are aiming at £1.50 and you've spent that £1.50 all on the ingredients, it's going to be a great sandwich, I'm sure. However, you aren't actually going to make the margin that you're anticipating. So don't be a fool, create the cost sheets and take into account every single cost that is involved in that sandwich, and that will give you your gross profit. Don't include labour, because you don't want to be breaking down sandwiches to the cost of the person making that sandwich at that moment, at that minute. Focus in on the gross margin of that product. And then what you do in this kind of retail scenario is you take the cross average of all of the products. So you've got a sandwich at this margin, a coffee at that margin, and then you can average it out if you need to.
Whenever you're ready.
That's the lads doing the shop telling me that I need to get out of here. We'll have to make them wait. But take the average margins across certain products so that you know that you're maintaining it, because one might be a lower margin and one might be a higher margin, and then you can average out across your product portfolio what your margin is going to end up looking like. Second example, and this is where it gets slightly more difficult if you're in the kind of service or product market. So if I use Lego models, which is the subject matter I obviously understand, at this point you've got the cost of the materials, the bricks, the glue, the steel. These are the costs that go into that model. But here is where it gets slightly different. You do factor in labour into those models, even if they are salaries, because actually they are a component part of making that model. The model cannot be made without that person. Slightly different to the sandwich, where it's so microscopic, but when your turnover is predicated on fewer but very big sales, there's nowhere else to offset salaries. And actually in this particular scenario, we assign some salaries. We have the overheads, what we kind of call the central management team, but actually if you were a builder and you were building that specific model, it would take you so many days and weeks that it was very easy to assign the cost to that model. So when we're talking about protecting the gross profit, a lot of what we did in that scenario is bespoke, so you cannot have a one size fits all. The big thing in our favour in that scenario, that there was no market value. There is a perceived value, which we've talked about in other videos, that just because it costs you a certain amount doesn't mean that the client is willing to pay that margin that you may then apply on top. So you have to work out what the perceived value is and whether you can achieve the margins that you want to. So again, this is where it's really critical to work out what your cost base is so you can follow the margin. So we're going to focus in here on, you've got your cost base, your steel, your glue, your builders, your bricks. That is what makes you the model. You sell it at that point, and then your margin is somewhere in between. And we could sell a model from £500 up to £500,000. It is an entirely bespoke thing, but you're focusing in on the margin, so you have to hunker down and actually ensure that the costs are what you believe the costs are. Because if you get it wrong, the more that sale scales up, the more the turnover scales up, the bigger the problem, and the road back to profit is much harder for. So focus in on your cost base, and do not just assume that you are hitting these margins every time you sell something just because it says so on a piece of paper. You have to check, double check and triple check on a monthly and weekly basis that you are delivering the margins that you set out to achieve, because it's very easy to see margins erode. You think you've factored in the price of glue or bricks, but there is inflation and invoice prices fluctuate, so sometimes it may be a little lower, sometimes it may be a little higher, and hopefully it averages out, but don't assume it averages out. Double, triple check, follow the profit. So that's it for today, but most importantly, stay safe. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time. Bye.